Hi, my name's Caris, and this Christmas my sister's husband looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You're not staying here. We need your signature more than your presence. Not Merry Christmas, not how was your flight, just terms and conditions." I wasn't invited to celebrate. I was summoned to co-sign a loan I didn't ask for, to buy a home I'd never live in, for a family that barely remembered I existed, unless they needed something. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing I'd been useful, never loved. Present, but erased. Family, only on paper. What would you have done in my place? Stayed silent, or finally drawn the line? Before we dive in, tell me, what time is it where you are? And have you ever been treated like a convenience instead of a person? Let us know in the comments. This story is for you. The plane wheels hit the ground with a jolt I felt in my ribs. I gripped the armrest, then let go, almost embarrassed at how tightly I'd been holding on. Asheville to Charlotte wasn't a long flight, but it felt heavier than it should have. In my lap, I cradled a soft red bag with a gold ribbon, just a small hand cream set I'd picked up at the airport gift shop. Something simple, something I hoped would still matter. I stepped off the plane into the chill of the terminal, pulling my coat tighter. My phone buzzed as I texted, "Landed, gate B3. No response. After 15 minutes standing near the curb, watching cars glide by with families laughing inside, a silver Infiniti SUV finally pulled up. The window rolled down just enough to reveal Brannon, my brother-in-law, with one hand on the wheel and the other still thumbing through his phone. "Hey," he muttered, eyes not leaving the screen. He didn't get out, didn't pop the trunk, just let the engine idle. I lifted my roller bag into the back myself, trying not to strain my shoulder. When I climbed into the front seat, he didn't adjust the heat or ask if I was cold. The air inside was stiff, like the silence after a slammed door. "She tied up?" I asked, pretending I didn't already know the answer. Brannon grunted. "She's been swamped with listings all week. Said to tell you hi." The roads were dark, lined with damp pine trees and glowing wreaths on porches. I watched the blurred lights pass as he started in on small talk, mortgage rates, shifts in his department, something about a new brokerage firm looking to expand. He kept it all surface level, but I knew the pattern. Then he cleared his throat. "Actually," he began, still not looking at me, "there's something Isolde and I wanted to ask you." I turned slightly, alert. "Okay?" He hesitated a second too long. "So, this year's been a bit full. Our guest room's taken, one of our brokers is staying a few nights. Long story short, we thought it might be best if you booked a motel nearby. We'll cover half the cost, of course." I blinked. "A motel?" He nodded. "Yeah, just for the week. You know, with the kids and, well, it's all a bit tight." The words hung in the air like frost. "And," he added, almost as an afterthought, "we were hoping you might be open to co-signing something, just a little document, part of our loan pre-approval, nothing crazy, standard stuff." I didn't say anything. I just looked out the window, suddenly aware of the ache building in my jaw from clenching so hard. A motel, for the holidays, and a signature, like I was a spare key they only remembered when the front door jammed. I forced a smile. "Sure," I whispered, barely trusting my voice not to crack. He exhaled, relieved. "Knew you'd understand? You've always been solid." That word, solid, landed like a stone in my stomach. Last Christmas, I'd sat outside on a plastic lawn chair because they forgot to bring an extra seat in. A miscommunication, they'd said, while sipping wine beside the fireplace. I told myself then it was just one bad moment, a fluke. But now, I wasn't here for Christmas. I was a contingency plan, a name on a line. He pulled into the motel parking lot without a word. I checked in with a paper ID and a prepaid card he handed over like a receipt. The lobby smelled like disinfectant and faint peppermint. Back in the car, he didn't get out. Just watched as I dragged my suitcase toward the side entrance. I could feel his headlights on my back, then hear the tires crunching gravel as he pulled away. I didn't look back. As I watched them drive off without a second glance, I wondered, was I ever really invited? The gravel crunched faintly under my boots as I walked toward the side entrance of the motel. I didn't rush. The wind wasn't sharp, but it had that certain bite, the kind that feels more personal than weather has any right to. The check-in clerk had given me a plastic key card with a smudge on it and directions I already forgot. Room 118, I think. Or was it 116? I walked past a vending machine flickering under a busted light. It hummed like it was breathing. That was the only sound around me, save for the far-off hum of the interstate. My room was near the back, next to a maintenance closet. Fitting. I opened the door to a stale waft of bleach and something citrusy that couldn't quite hide the years underneath. The carpet was thin, worn into a darker track between the door and the bathroom. I dropped my suitcase near the bed and sat down slowly, still holding the gift bag I'd brought. The lamp on the nightstand blinked twice before settling into a soft, untrustworthy glow. I exhaled. I didn't cry. Instead, I reached for my phone and opened the family group chat. The last message with my name in it was 2 months ago. Isolde had written, "Hey Caris, any chance you could Venmo $150 for the venue deposit? Promise I'll pay you back next week." I had. She didn't. Before that it was, "Need someone to take the boys Saturday night." And, "Can you co-sign for Mom's dental stuff?" And, "You good with doing the pickup for the wreath fundraiser?" Nothing that said, "How are you holding up?" Not even, "Safe flight?" I scrolled, my thumb hovering over a photo from last year. The whole family in matching plaid pajamas, sitting on the couch around the fireplace, grinning. I wasn't in the frame, because I was outside. That memory didn't knock gently. It barged in. Christmas Eve, last year. I'd shown up with a gift in hand, something small but thoughtful. I was told dinner had already been served, and there were no more chairs, but I could sit on the back porch near the space heater. I remember holding a red-wrapped box in my lap, watching through the sliding glass door as they laughed and passed plates. When I finally stepped inside, cold and embarrassed, Isolde had been handing out gifts, tags carefully written in silver ink. My name wasn't on a single one. She blinked at me like I'd surprised her. "Oh, I thought you said you weren't coming." I never said that. She handed me a lavender candle, still in the same bag I had given her the year before. I recognized the folded card I had written. She'd just ripped off the name. Dad patted my shoulder. "Don't make this a thing, sweetie. You're too sensitive." Too sensitive. That was always the line. And somehow, I'd always believed it. I told myself they didn't mean it, that I was reading too much into things, that family was complicated and I was doing the right thing by keeping the peace. But tonight, alone in this room with scratchy sheets and the faint sound of an ice machine groaning through the wall, I saw it clearly. They didn't forget. They just didn't care enough to remember. I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone again, and opened the Notes app. My fingers hovered for a moment before typing. The motel, the candle, the tree with no tag, Dad saying I was too sensitive. The Venmo requests, the half-paid motel, the favor dressed like inclusion. Each line hit the screen like a quiet stone tossed into water. No ripples, just weight. I kept going. My fingers moved faster now, no longer hesitating. The time they called me when Mom was sick, only to ask if I could take her to the appointment because no one else wanted to take off work. The dinner I cooked that no one remembered I brought. The time Isolde told her friend I was just in admin stuff, like I didn't have a degree, like I didn't matter. I kept typing until my battery warned me it was low. I wasn't planning to send it. I wasn't preparing for a confrontation. I just needed to see it. Laid bare. In my words, without edits or filters, just truth. That truth made something inside me shift, not explode, not scream, just settle. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't needy, I'd simply been erased by people too comfortable with my silence. I set the phone down on the chipped nightstand and stared at the blinking lamp again. It buzzed faintly above me, casting a lopsided halo against the ceiling. And out loud, barely more than a whisper, I said it. No more. Not in anger, not as a threat. I had spent decades being their cushion. It was time they felt the floor. I stayed there in that motel room for a long moment, just listening. The heater whirred with that old humming sound, clicking now and then like it needed to remind me it was still trying. I sat cross-legged on the edge of the bed, holding my phone loosely in my hand, staring at the carpet like it might suddenly explain how I got here. I opened the voice memos app. It was still there. Brannon accidental audio. I'd saved it weeks ago, maybe out of denial, maybe proof, maybe both. I pressed play. His voice was muffled at first, but it came through clearly after a second. She doesn't ask questions, man. You just drop the paper and act like it's already agreed. I mean, she's basically a walking checkbook. No pushback, not even a pause. Then some laughter, probably to whoever he was talking to. Then the sound of silverware clinking, and a laugh that unmistakably belonged to my sister. I paused it. Let the silence answer for me. 3 months ago, brunch at that trendy spot Isolde loved, the kind of place with $14 avocado toast and reclaimed wood furniture. She had messaged me with 3 heart emojis and a miss you sis, followed by, need to catch up, just us. I remember I showed up 10 minutes early. I'd put on makeup for once, a clean, soft blue sweater, a scarf Mom gave me 3 birthdays ago. I even curled the ends of my hair, because some small, stubborn part of me still believed this could be different. When I got there, Isolde was already seated, with Brannon. "Oh, he just happened to be nearby," she chirped. I smiled and nodded, ignoring the way my stomach sank. The menus were already flipped open. The small talk started instantly. Her latest listing had so many views on TikTok. Brannon's team hit their Q3 target, and I said I was still in admin at the university. They nodded politely. Brannon didn't ask which department, then came the ask. It was almost graceful the way he slid that folder across the table, like it held nothing but a brunch menu. "Just something simple," he said. "Some house stuff, no rush." I opened it and immediately saw the bolded figure, $280,000. Home equity loan cosigner request, my name already typed in. I looked up. Isolde reached across the table and patted my hand like we were exchanging recipes. "It's just a signature, Carrie. You're the only one with great credit in the family." I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. I just stared at it while they smiled. Brannon flagged down the waiter, ordered another mimosa. I said I'd think about it. They didn't say thank you. I paid for brunch. Again. On my way to the restroom, a young waitress brushed past me, then turned and gently touched my arm. "Ma'am," she whispered, "don't sign anything. You looked like you were in a hostage negotiation back there." I laughed. Reflex, defensive, but something in her eyes told me she meant it, and that she'd seen people like me before, quiet, useful, overruled. Back in the motel room now, I let the voice memo play again. Then I deleted it, not to forget, but because I didn't need to hear it anymore. It wasn't a surprise, it was just confirmation. I stood up, suddenly aware of how tight the air in that room felt, like the walls had inched closer while I wasn't looking. I grabbed my coat and reached into the side pocket of my purse. The folder was still there, folded once, creased on the edge, the corner softened from weeks of shifting around. I walked outside. The cold hit me sharp in the lungs, not cruel, just clean. The parking lot was empty except for a single sedan with fogged-up windows. No one around to hear me breathe or think or regret. I stepped past the vending machines and paused under the busted lamp. The yellow light blinked like it was struggling to stay alive, like it understood. I pulled out the folded paper, stared at it. I'd never turned it in, never said yes, but I had kept it. Why? Because I was raised to believe that being helpful meant being loved, because saying no felt like betrayal, even when I was the one being betrayed. I held it up, looked at the names, Brannon's, Isolde's, and mine, right beneath theirs, and then I tore it, not fast, not in a fit of rage, just deliberate. The sound echoed louder than I expected, like it had been waiting to be set free. The paper tore easily. Shame never does. I didn't sleep much that night. The heater clanked like it had arthritis, and the mattress felt like it had been borrowed from a cot at a church basement. Around 9 the next morning, I grabbed my coat and walked until I found warmth that didn't come with a price tag. The downtown library was nearly empty. Bless it. Just a few students typing away at terminals and a mother seated cross-legged on the rug near the children's section, reading to her daughter in a soft, sing-song voice. I stood there longer than I should have, pretending to scan the shelf of travel guides. That child's giggle? It cracked something in me. I couldn't remember a single person reading to me like that. Not once. I found a quiet seat near the back, tucked between cookbooks and dusty atlases. My phone vibrated in my coat pocket. Brannon. Of course. I stared at the screen long enough for the call to go to voicemail. A second later, it buzzed again. I answered, not out of courtesy, but to end it. "Hey," he said, all business. "Just checking if you signed those papers yet. I told the underwriter we'd have them by Friday." He didn't even bother with hello. I stared at the rows of glossy baking books in front of me and replied evenly, "I tore them up." There was a pause, maybe a beat longer than usual. Then he let out a dry chuckle. "You know you're messing up our timeline, right?" The audacity in that sentence. Our timeline. As if I'd ever been included. I said, calm but firmer this time, "No, I'm finally adjusting it." His voice dropped, colder. "You think anyone else would have put up with you? I married into this circus. Don't make me regret it more than I already do." It was the kind of thing that would have left me speechless once. Not anymore. And suddenly, without asking for it, memory rose like smoke. It was last Thanksgiving. I'd flown in from a 3-day conference in Denver, straight from baggage claim to their front door. Isolde barely looked up as she handed me an apron. "We're behind," she said. "Brannon's parents are coming." I cooked for 6 hours. I carved the turkey while Brannon and Isolde posted selfies with the hashtag #FamilyGratitude. Then I did the dishes while they opened a second bottle of wine and talked loudly about Zillow listings. When I finally sat down to eat, cold sweet potatoes, no gravy, Brannon raised a glass and said, "You all should thank Caris. She's the reason the bank approved our kitchen reno. Her credit did more than her cooking, though." Everyone laughed, even Isolde. I smiled like a mannequin, silent, tight, and I remember, vividly, thinking I could have vanished from that room and no one would have noticed until they ran out of clean forks. Back in the library, I said nothing more to Brannon, just ended the call. No click, no final word, just silence. Then I powered the phone off and tucked it deep into a children's book about kindness. I sat there for a while, watching the mother and daughter pick out another book together. The child asked something, and the mother bent low to listen. Really listen. I stood up slowly and walked toward the exit. By the door, a bright green flyer caught my eye on the bulletin board. It read, "Holiday potluck for singles and seniors. All are welcome. Bring nothing but yourself." I took one, folded it neatly, slipped it into my coat. It didn't mean anything yet, but maybe it would. Later that afternoon, I stopped at the grocery store on my way back. No list, no real plan. Just wandering, quiet. I turned the corner by the seasonal aisle and froze. Isolde. She was standing next to a display of cranberry sauce, scrolling through her phone, hair perfect, outfit screaming, "Effortless holiday." She looked up, saw me. She blinked once, recognition flickering behind her polished expression. I didn't stop. I didn't say hello. I just walked past with my cart. No food inside, just one thing, a candle. Lavender. Same brand she'd once re-gifted me. She had no place at their table, but that didn't mean she had nowhere to sit. The next afternoon, I wandered into a church thrift shop tucked between a shuttered bakery and a payday loan office. The bell above the door jingled weakly. Inside, the air smelled like cinnamon and old hymnals. "Afternoon, sweetheart," said the woman behind the counter, a slight silver-haired lady with a navy cardigan and reading glasses dangling from her neck. Her name tag read, Mildred, written in careful blue cursive. "Looking for something special?" I glanced around at the mismatched mugs, stacks of used books, and racks of tired Christmas sweaters. "Just browsing? Maybe a candle?" I said. She smiled gently. "You hosting this year?" I paused. "Maybe. Just for myself." Mildred didn't flinch, didn't pity. "Well then," she said, "make it a lovely one, just as worthy." Something about the way she said it made me want to stay longer. I wandered to the back, thumbing through a bin of cookbooks. That's when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with Isolde. "Brannon's upset. Can you just stop being difficult? You've always made things harder than they need to be." A second later, "Also, we might need your Costco card." Hours expired. No please, no are you okay, just an assumption that I'd show up, like always, that I'd hand over the card and keep my mouth shut. I leaned against a shelf of old romance paperbacks and stared at the messages, my stomach turning slowly. It wasn't even the text itself. It was the pattern, so familiar it almost felt scripted, the same script they'd followed for years. They didn't ask if I was okay when I lost my job 4 years ago. They didn't ask if I had rent covered last winter when I had to skip Christmas entirely. But they asked for my card. They always asked when it involved money. And once they asked for more than that. I still remember the day they bought that house. It was supposed to be a temporary loan, $18,000 for the down payment. I had just finished paying off my student loans. I didn't even hesitate. At the housewarming, Brannon raised his wine glass and said to the whole room, "Here's to family who supports you and doesn't keep score." The guests laughed, Isolde laughed, and I stood there with a paper plate of cheese cubes, heat rising behind my eyes, realizing I wasn't even worth a thank you. Not in front of strangers, that line had a blade in it, and they knew it. Back in the thrift store, I opened my messages. My thumbs hovered for a second, then I typed, "Sorry, no card. Also not available for errands this week." And then I blocked her number. It felt small, silly even, but my hands were shaking. It's strange how something so simple, pressing a button, can feel like you just jumped off a ledge you didn't know you were standing on. At the counter, Mildred wrapped the candle carefully in a brown paper bag and handed it over with both hands. "May your light stay lit," she said. "Thanks," I whispered, voice catching more than I'd like. The air outside was turning sharp by the time I got back to my apartment. I walked up the creaky stairs to my second-floor unit, keys in one hand, the candle in the other. Inside, I clicked on the baseboard heater and waited for it to rattle itself into life. The room smelled faintly of leftover takeout and lavender wax. I placed the candle in the center of my kitchen table, really just a wooden TV tray, and lit it. "This is still a home," I whispered, even though no one was there to hear it. "Mine." I sank into the couch, pulled out my old notebook from the drawer, and opened a fresh page. Then I started writing. Not poetry, not a journal entry, just facts, dates, account numbers, names, the check I wrote in 2016, the utilities I covered in 2018, the car Brannon borrowed for 3 months and returned with scratches and no gas, the favors they never repaid. I wasn't writing it to shame them. I was writing it to see it, to prove to myself that I hadn't imagined it all, that the slow erasure of me hadn't been my imagination. I was done being available. Before bed, I unpacked the bag from the thrift shop. Wedged between the candle and an old recipe pamphlet was a folded piece of paper. It was a note, handwritten. "You deserve light this season, even if no one else thinks so. Mildred." My hand tightened around the edge of the paper. It was just ink and paper, but it was something. Someone had seen me, and for the first time in years, I believed it. She was no longer afraid of being alone. She was afraid of staying invisible. The morning air was biting, the kind that clung to your bones and whispered that winter wasn't done with you yet. I pulled my coat tighter and steered my car toward Isolde's cul-de-sac, the same pristine street where every Christmas light was symmetrical and every mailbox matched. I wasn't here to linger, just to pick up the last of my things. An old plastic bin of ornaments I'd forgotten I'd stored in their garage. That's all. A simple in and out, Brannon was already standing in the driveway when I pulled up. No smile, no greeting, just that smug tilt of his head, arms crossed like I was the one encroaching on his territory. "You should have told me you were going to block Isolde," he said, not moving an inch. "Now she's upset again." I kept both hands on the steering wheel for a beat, then slowly opened the door and stepped out. "She's upset?" I asked calmly. Brannon exhaled through his nose like I was being ridiculous. "By the way," he added with a grin that didn't reach his eyes, "her parents are offering to co-sign, so we're fine. Merry Christmas." I didn't answer, not with words. I walked past him, my boots crunching the frost on the driveway. He didn't follow, just stood there watching like a landlord waiting for the tenant to collect their things. The box was already out by the garage, sitting in plain view. But what stopped me cold was the thick black Sharpie line striking through my name on the lid. My name, just scratched out, like it had never mattered. I picked up the box, not saying a word. I didn't need to. Later that day, after dropping the bin at my apartment, I sat at the kitchen table nursing a cup of tea when my phone buzzed. A text came through, an unknown number. It was a screenshot. A neighbor I barely knew had messaged, "Figured you'd want to see this?" The image was of a post in the neighborhood HOA group chat, from Isolde. "People who leech off others and then act like victims aren't welcome in this neighborhood." Underneath were comments. Yikes. Totally agree. Some left vague hearts. Some were names I recognized from block parties, cookie exchanges, the same people who waved at me in driveways. Now nodding along in silence as my sister dragged me through the dirt, again, and this time, publicly. I closed the message and stared at the fridge for a long moment. A magnet held up an old grocery list. Another held a faded thank you note from a coworker. Normal things, quiet things. But somewhere in the back of my brain, something ancient stirred. Something I'd buried under years of people-pleasing and polite smiles. Enough. I pulled out the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet and found the envelope I hadn't opened in over 3 years. Inside, the title documents from when they bought the house. Only Brannon's name was on the deed, but the wire transfer receipt with my account number proved otherwise. The down payment had been mine. The equity they now leveraged with smug entitlement? Mine too. By late afternoon, I was sitting in a quiet corner office across from Melina Dorr, a lawyer I'd met once during my HR training years ago. She hadn't aged much, still wore burgundy lipstick and wireframe glasses, still had the voice of someone who didn't rush a single sentence. Melina listened as I laid it out. The transfer, the receipts, the text messages, the joke at the housewarming. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she leaned back slightly. "What you did," she said evenly, "was not a gift. You made a financial transfer. That's legally actionable, especially if they used your funds without formal agreement or acknowledgement." I exhaled, slow and controlled. She continued, "And the group chat? If we want to press defamation, we have a starting point." Melina slid a printed letter toward me, already drafted, crisp and deliberate. To Brannon Crest and Isolde Crest, effective immediately, Ms. Caris Delora is asserting her legal interest regarding the financial contribution made toward the down payment of the property at address. Furthermore, public statements made that imply character defamation will be documented and pursued as necessary. I reached for the pen. As I signed my name at the bottom, the tip of the pen didn't shake. Not once. "Send it," I said quietly. Outside her office, dusk had started creeping over the sidewalks. I stood for a moment at the edge of the parking lot, the wind tugging at the edge of my scarf, the sky turning a deep slate blue. I pulled out my phone, opened the message thread with the neighbor. "Thanks for the screenshot," I typed. "I'll let my lawyer know." Then I turned off notifications. No more justifying myself to people who clapped when I suffered and whispered when I resisted. They wanted silence. But silence now had a signature, and a lawyer's letterhead. By the time I pulled into the HOA Community Center's parking lot, the last light of Christmas Eve had already faded. Families were arriving in clusters, holding trays of deviled eggs and bundt cakes, their kids trailing behind in reindeer pajamas and snow boots. I didn't bring food. I brought facts. Inside, the room buzzed with holiday music and polite conversation. Tinsel was draped over the folding chairs, and someone had lit cinnamon-scented candles that reminded me of childhood. Except this wasn't childhood. This was war, just dressed in red and gold. I caught eyes with a few neighbors, then watched them quickly look away, their mouths tightening into that careful, polite smile that meant, I know something about you, but I'll pretend I don't. Isolde stood by the punch bowl, dolled up in green velvet and rhinestones. She laughed a little too loudly at something Brannon whispered in her ear. He was handing out flyers, holiday-themed apparently, but the smugness on his face said they weren't just about eggnog. I grabbed a paper as I walked by. In festive red font it read, "This season, let's remember, some people sue family and call it love. Merry litigious Christmas." Below the quote there were snowflakes, and their HOA committee logo. I stood there, holding the paper. I didn't blink. I didn't crumple it. I just folded it once, neatly, and slipped it into my coat pocket. A woman behind me, someone I barely knew but had exchanged a few neighborly greetings with over the years, leaned in and muttered, "So, you're suing your sister? That's festive." I turned my head slowly toward her. "I'll be addressing that in open comments tonight," I said evenly. She straightened up like she'd touched a hot stove. The HOA president, a retired contractor named Doyle, who always wore khaki year-round, glanced at me from the podium. "You're on the list," he said, his voice low but firm. 2 minutes, after Carol's." I nodded once. As people began to gather in the main seating area, I stepped aside and opened my folder. Inside were 3 printed slides. One showed the original bank transfer receipt, $68,000 wired from my savings account on May 3, 2018. Another included an itemized breakdown of the remodel costs Isolde claimed were covered by a private lender. The last one was a copy of my lawyer's letterhead with Melina's note underlined, "Financial contribution made without written agreement does not equal gift." When Doyle called my name, I stood up. Some looked confused, others expectant. A few smirked. Isolde didn't look at me. She was busy adjusting her bracelet. "Good evening," I said, keeping my tone even. "I won't be long. I just wanted to clarify a few things, since misinformation tends to spread faster than truth." I held up the first slide. "This is a record of a transfer I made to help fund a home that does not bear my name." A shuffle of murmurs. I waited. "This is what's been said about me recently, publicly." I gestured to the flyer. "And this," I held up the last page, "is what I've done in response. I didn't go around making noise. I sent a letter, a formal one, because I believe dignity matters." I paused. "I haven't named names. But if anyone in this room has ever been used, erased, or rebranded as difficult for simply protecting their own boundaries, then you already know the shape of my story." Silence. Not a tight-lipped silence. A still one. The kind that settles into chairs and doesn't budge. Brannon shifted in his seat. Isolde finally looked up. Her mouth was tight, eyes narrowing like she was trying to decode something she hadn't expected me to know. I stepped down without waiting for Doyle's thanks. By the time the meeting ended, a few neighbors had approached me. One man I remembered once asking me to babysit his dog said, "I had no idea. You spoke clearly, respectfully." Another woman patted my arm and whispered, "That was brave." Even Doyle shook my hand. "You didn't take the bait. That'll sting more than any lawsuit." I nodded. Across the room, I saw Isolde storming toward the exit. Brannon trailed behind her, waving the remaining flyers like someone desperately trying to sell coupons no one wanted. I didn't chase them. I didn't need to. She thought she'd buried me in that house. I just turned it into a courtroom. 2 weeks later, the courtroom took literal form. The HOA dispute hearing was held in the meeting room of the community center. Same folding chairs, same cold floors. But this time, the chairs faced a long, rectangular table where the board sat, stern, and quiet. At the center was Doyle, the HOA president, flanked by 2 other committee members with clipboards and highlighters. I arrived early. Melina walked in a few minutes after me, calm, composed, in her usual navy blazer. She nodded once as we took our seats side by side, papers already stacked and labeled in her leather folder. I didn't say much. I didn't have to. Brannon and Isolde breezed in together 5 minutes late. She wore winter white like it was a weapon. Sharp heels, sharper eyes. Brannon smirked, greeting people like this was a cocktail party instead of a legal hearing. The board began the session. This meeting is in response to a formal dispute filed regarding property contribution, defamation, and ongoing harassment within the HOA community, Doyle said, voice flat. Melina leaned over and gently placed a tabbed folder before them. Evidence packet, labeled by date. Isolde scoffed. Is this really necessary? Brannon chuckled like a man entertaining himself. It's all a misunderstanding. Family mess. Shouldn't be dragged into HOA business. That's when he started. Twist S8 began unfolding like he'd rehearsed it. I never authorized anything defamatory, Brannon said, tone overly measured. And the social posts? I have no idea how those went up. I don't even handle the accounts. And honestly, I think dragging personal drama into a public forum is unfortunate. He turned slightly toward me. Caris, we're still family. My hands remained in my lap. Melina didn't blink. Please continue your statement, Mr. Crest. We'll be reviewing actual communications in a moment. He nodded stiffly, then leaned back in his chair. Just then, Doyle raised a hand. Actually, before we move on, we've had a request to speak from a community member. A soft shuffle. It was Marla Nguyen, my next-door neighbor, usually quiet, known for her perfect lawn and homemade cookies. She stood, holding printed screenshots. I think you all should see these, she said, voice a bit shaky but clear. These were posted in the wrong group chat by Brannon Crest 2 days after the HOA holiday party. She passed them down. Twist S14 hit the room like a dropped chandelier. Brannon's text, in black and white, read, "We need to ruin her rep before she flips that condo. HOA folks are sheep, just need the right story." There was a second message, too. "The girl's a walking trigger. Give her just enough rope." Gasps erupted. The committee leaned forward, reading. Even Doyle's face twitched. Isolde turned toward Brannon, lips parted in disbelief. You said you didn't—" He stood. "That wasn't meant—" Melina raised a hand. "Intent is irrelevant. You sent it. We have timestamps." Silence. No one laughed this time. I took a breath and stood. I never asked for much, just respect, acknowledgement, a seat at the table I helped build. I turned toward the board and slid over a fresh document. This is the trust agreement for the condo in my name. It is no longer a shared property. I'm transferring it into a legal trust to ensure it's preserved, without interference. Brannon and Isolde are formally barred from residency, claims, or use. Isolde stood abruptly. "You can't do that." "I just did," I replied. A pause hung in the air. Then Doyle spoke. "The board finds Mr. and Mrs. Crest's conduct inappropriate and in violation of several HOA ethics clauses. A formal reprimand will be filed. Additionally, the HOA will issue a community notice clarifying the outcome of this hearing." Gasps again. Whispers. But none of them directed at me. The meeting adjourned soon after. Outside the building, as people filed out, a few came up to me, quietly. One neighbor said, "We misjudged you." "I'm sorry." Another offered a smile and a soft, "Well done." Isolde refused to meet my eyes. Brannon was already halfway to the parking lot. I stood still for a moment, watching them disappear into the dark. No tears, no apology. Just me, holding the one document they never expected, their eviction notice. I walked away that day with no apology, just silence, and their eviction notice. And somehow, that silence felt cleaner than any apology ever could. 1 month later, I woke up in Austin. The light spilling into my new condo was softer here, like it had traveled far just to greet me gently. No voices echoed off the walls, no footsteps from someone else's drama, just stillness and the hum of the heater kicking on as the January chill clung to the windows. I padded into the kitchen barefoot, my mug warming in both hands. The lease confirmation sat folded on the counter, delivered that morning by a smiling courier. 2 bed, 1 bath, just enough. No one's name but mine on the paperwork. As I walked through the hallway, I passed by the framed photo I'd unpacked the night before. My father and me, arms around each other at the county fair, grinning like goofballs. Isolde had once taken it off the condo wall, said it didn't match the decor. I hung it here first, next to the front door, because now I was the one choosing what stayed and what never came through the threshold again. I glanced toward a small stack of things I hadn't sorted yet. Tucked between a box of cords and an unopened scented soap set, there it was, the envelope. Mistletoe green, bent at the corner, the one Brannon said was just decorative. I don't know why I opened it. Curiosity? Closure? Inside was a Christmas card, crumpled, unsigned. No message, just a stock photo of a fireplace and the words, "Warm wishes." No signature, no warmth. I stared at it for a few seconds, then walked to the trash can, opened the lid, and dropped it in. I didn't slam it shut, just closed it, like someone folding a casket for a feeling that had long since flatlined. The landline rang an hour later. "Hi, this is Talia from the HOA committee," said the voice on the other end. "Just wanted to confirm, Brannon and Isolde are officially restricted from your previous property. The restraining order was finalized last week." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "We were surprised," she added. "They didn't contest it. They just left." That part hit differently. They left. Not a word, no tantrum, no fight. Maybe because deep down, they knew. I thanked her, hung up, and went to my balcony. The sun was out, but barely warm. I wrapped my sweater tighter and looked down at the courtyard below. That's when I saw her. A girl, maybe 10, sitting on the stoop outside the unit across from mine. Her knees were pulled up to her chest, shoulders stiff. I watched for a moment, then headed down with a granola bar in my pocket and no plan in my heart. She didn't notice me until I sat beside her. "You okay?" I asked, gently. She wiped her nose with her sleeve. "My sister said I was a burden in front of her friends." I nodded slowly. "I know that feeling." She looked at me surprised. "Really? Really?" I said. "But listen, people who say that, they're showing you their limits, not yours." She didn't reply, but her eyes softened. "You'll grow through it. Just don't let them shrink you." After a pause, she took the granola bar without a word. We sat there a few more minutes in silence that didn't feel empty. Later that night, back inside, I lit a new candle, one I'd picked up from Mildred's shop before the move. It smelled like pine and cinnamon and something else I couldn't name, but liked. I opened my notebook and wrote 2 things. January 3rd, Austin, new lease, new light. I didn't need revenge or recognition. I just needed to see myself again, and this time, not through their eyes. I stood in the doorway for a moment, arms folded, and whispered aloud, "This is still a home. Mine." The air didn't answer, but it didn't reject me either, and sometimes, that's more than enough. I wasn't too cold. They were just never warm.